In the darkest corners of the 20th century, amid hunger, brutality, and hopelessness, Viktor E. Frankl discovered something the world had forgotten. When everything is taken from a person, one freedom remains: the freedom to choose one's attitude. Frankl was not just a psychiatrist. He was a witness and a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps. He lost his parents, his brother, and his pregnant wife. Almost everything that defined his life was erased. And yet, out of that devastation emerged a philosophy that has transformed millions of lives. Logotherapy, the idea that the primary drive in humans is not pleasure or power, but meaning. This is not a story about death. It is a story about choice. The choice to live with purpose even when tomorrow is uncertain. This is the journey behind man's search for meaning. In the camps, men did not die first of starvation or cold. They died when they lost their why. Frankl observed something powerful. Those who had a reason to live could bear almost any how. Some prisoners dreamed of returning to their families. Others clung to unfinished work. Some held tight to faith, and those thin threads, invisible to the world, became lifelines. Frankl wrote that even in suffering, life never stops asking questions, and it is up to us to answer. Not with words, but with courage. Meaning is not something we wait for. It is something we create, even in pain, even in loss. When Viktor Frankl arrived at the concentration camps, he was not greeted with ideology or philosophy. He was met with the stripping away of self. Clothes, hair, names, all taken. What remained was a number and a question. Would inner freedom survive when everything external vanished? In those early days, Frankl witnessed the first psychological shock, disbelief wrapped in numbness. He wrote that prisoners often clung to the delusion of reprieve, the hope that somehow this would all end before it truly began. But reality arrived quickly. Inmates faced starvation, forced labor, disease, humiliation, and selections that meant life or death decided by the lift of a finger. Most people assume suffering breaks the human spirit, but Frankl saw something different. He saw that people did not die simply because of their conditions. They died when they could no longer see meaning beyond the conditions. The men who walked into the camps were varied: intellectuals, farmers, doctors, teachers, artists. But the camp reduced everyone to the same ground zero and revealed what could not be reduced. In the midst of despair, a few people behaved differently. They shared their last piece of bread. They comforted the dying. They whispered words of hope when silence was safer. Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." He saw that even when bodies were imprisoned, the spirit could remain unshackled, and that realization became the foundation of his life's work. There are 3 ways, Frankl believed, that a person finds meaning: through work, through love, and through the attitude adopted toward unavoidable suffering. Inside the camps, the first 2 were mostly stripped away. There was no career, no freedom to create, and families had been torn apart. But there, in the bleakest situation imaginable, the third path, the attitude toward suffering, became the source of dignity. Frankl reflected on his wife often, without knowing whether she was alive or dead. Yet, in those moments of silent remembrance, he discovered something profound. The salvation of man is through love and in love. Even the act of imagining someone you love can be sustaining. Love, in Frankl's eyes, was not only a bond, it was a lifeline. And then came the ultimate realization. Suffering itself does not destroy meaning. Meaning is what determines whether suffering destroys us or strengthens us. He wrote that if pain has a purpose, it ceases to be purely suffering. What crushes people is not pain, it is meaningless pain. In some way, Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. In the camps, suffering was not abstract. It was frost-bitten feet. It was standing for hours in the snow. It was starvation, beatings, and watching others disappear without farewell. But Frankl noticed something extraordinary. Not all prisoners responded the same way to identical conditions. Some collapsed inwardly. Others held on with an inner strength that didn't come from food, or comfort, or hope of rescue. It came from conviction, the belief that life still expected something from them. Frankl wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." He observed that when a prisoner knew why he must survive, a person waiting for them, a task unfinished, a purpose not yet lived, he could endure almost anyhow. Those who had no future to imagine began to fade. Those who still saw their existence as unfinished, even in silence, even in grief, found strength invisible to the eye. What Frankl called the last of human freedoms wasn't merely about endurance. It was about inner authorship, the power to decide what your suffering means. Even when we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond, and that response becomes our legacy. When the concentration camps were finally liberated, one might expect overwhelming joy. But Frankl described something more complicated. Freedom returned slowly, not with celebration, but with disbelief. Some prisoners walked out, unable to feel anything. The world they remembered was gone. Their families were gone. Their homes were empty or occupied by strangers. And the life they dreamed of during captivity no longer existed. Frankl said the real challenge was not just surviving the camp. It was surviving freedom afterward. He wrote that meaning is not handed to us by circumstance. It is chosen, again and again, in whatever life remains. He did not return to find his wife. He did not return to his parents or his brother. He returned to loss, and then he began again. And from that place of pain, he created something that would outlive him. Logotherapy, the belief that the will to meaning is the core of human existence. He did not glorify suffering. He simply revealed that even the worst suffering cannot strip life of meaning unless we surrender it. Today, most people will never see the horrors Viktor Frankl saw. Yet many feel lost, empty, or directionless, not because life is too hard, but because it feels meaningless. Frankl did not deny pain. He did not promise perfection. Instead, he gave the world 3 truths. Meaning is not invented. It is discovered. You don't need ideal conditions to live with purpose. Even in suffering, life asks something of you. He suggested that we stop asking, "What do I expect from life?" and instead ask, "What is life expecting from me?" That shift turns victims into authors, and despair into direction. People today suffer different prisons: depression, burnout, loneliness, identity crises, but the cure Frankl offered still holds. When you live for something bigger than yourself, pain does not disappear, it transforms. Viktor Frankl did not survive by luck. He survived by meaning. He believed his work was not finished, and so he lived to finish it. From the ashes of the camps, he wrote a message for every person who has ever suffered, questioned, or lost their way. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And perhaps his most powerful lesson is this: you do not need a perfect life to live a meaningful one. Meaning is not waiting for you someday, it is asking for you now. So ask yourself, not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is life asking me to become through this?" Because as Frankl proved, purpose is not found in comfort, it is forged in choice. Your suffering is not your end. It is the page on which you are still writing. Thank you for watching. If this message inspired you, subscribe for more stories that bring meaning, courage, and perspective to life.